The USDA food pyramid, a familiar symbol of healthy eating, gracing classroom walls and cereal boxes for decades. But what if this seemingly benign icon was actually a product of political maneuvering and food industry lobbyists? Its foundations built not on solid nutritional science, not for the health of the American public, but on the shifting sands of industry influence? What if the very guide meant to lead us toward health has instead steered us down a path of chronic disease? This is the unsettling truth behind the USDA's dietary guidelines, a story of lobbying, misinformation, and the alarming power of food industry giants. Hey everyone, Dr. B here, and this video is not about conspiracy theories. It's about increasing transparency and the need to critically examine the information we're fed, literally. For decades, the USDA has walked a tightrope by serving two masters. Theoretically, it attempts to balance the interests of public health with the demands of powerful food lobbies in support of the food industry. This unbalanced balancing act has come at a steep cost, leaving a legacy of confusion and a nation struggling with diet-related illnesses. It's time to pull back the curtain on the USDA's dietary advice, to expose the hidden influences, and to empower individuals to make food choices based on evidence, not industry agendas. This is about reclaiming our health and our food, one plate at a time. The USDA's dietary guidelines began with pamphlets, not pyramids. In the late 1800s, the USDA offered nutritional guidance to a nation facing food insecurity. Early advice focused on variety, nutrient-rich foods, and moderation. The basic 7 food groups emerged in the 1940s, addressing wartime needs. Guidelines evolved with new science and societal changes. As affluence grew, the focus shifted. Whole foods gave way to industry-influenced guidelines. This culminated in the 1992 Food Guide Pyramid. The pyramid's grain emphasis and vague fat and sugar advice marked a turning point with lasting public health impacts. The problem with the USDA's dietary guidelines isn't just what they recommend, but why. The USDA operates with a dual mandate to promote both health and agriculture interests. This conflict of interest leads to dietary advice entangled with lobbying. The influence is evident in the overemphasis on grains and dairy, contributing to a diet high in sugars, unhealthy fats, and refined grains. This fuels diet-related diseases, costing billions in healthcare. The USDA food pyramid, with its broad base dedicated to grains, sent a clear message: base your diet on bread, cereal, rice, and pasta. While these foods can certainly be part of a healthy diet, the pyramid's emphasis on quantity over quality, coupled with its failure to adequately distinguish between whole grains and refined grains, contributed to a surge in the consumption of processed carbohydrates. The dairy industry, too, wielded significant influence on the USDA's recommendations. The pyramid's recommendation of 2 to 3 servings of dairy per day, despite growing evidence of the health risks associated with high dairy consumption for certain populations, raised concerns about the prioritization of industry interests over scientific evidence. The overconsumption of both grains, particularly refined grains, and dairy, has been linked to a range of health problems, from weight gain and insulin resistance to inflammation and certain types of cancer. This is not to say that all grains and dairy are inherently unhealthy, but that the USDA's blanket recommendations, influenced by industry lobbying, have created a dietary environment that prioritizes profit over public health. Challenging the pyramid. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine Lawsuit. The USDA's dietary guidelines, despite their flaws, held a position of unquestioned authority for many years. However, in 2000, a lawsuit filed by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, or PCRM, challenged the scientific integrity of the USDA's dietary recommendations. The lawsuit alleged that the agency's dietary guidelines were unduly influenced by the meat and dairy industries, and that the USDA Dietary Guideline Committee failed to disclose financial conflicts of interest. This led to recommendations that promoted these industries' products over healthier plant-based alternatives. The PCRM lawsuit, in demonstrating these financial conflicts, succeeded in bringing much-needed attention to the issue of industry influence on dietary guidelines. It highlighted the opaque process by which the USDA convened its dietary advisory committees. It also raised concerns about conflicts of interest and a disturbing lack of transparency. This lawsuit, and the coverage it received, marked a turning point in the conversation about the USDA's dietary advice. It forced the agency to defend its methods, spurred greater public scrutiny of its recommendations, and emboldened critics to demand greater transparency and accountability. In 2011, the familiar pyramid was retired, replaced by a new visual guide, MyPlate. This new icon, with its divided plate emphasizing fruits, vegetables, grains, and protein, aimed to address some of the criticisms leveled at the pyramid. It emphasized the importance of portion control and encouraged a more balanced intake of food groups. However, despite its updated look and message, MyPlate has been criticized for perpetuating many of the same problems that plagued the pyramid. The influence of industry lobbying remained evident, with dairy still occupying a prominent place on the plate, despite growing concerns about its health effects. The continued emphasis on grains, without clear guidance on the importance of choosing whole over refined grains, also drew criticism. MyPlate, while a step in the right direction in some ways, ultimately failed to fully address the underlying issue of industry influence on dietary guidelines. The new guide, while visually appealing and simpler in some respects, continued to reflect the interests of powerful food lobbies, raising questions about the USDA's ability to truly prioritize public health over industry profits. The USDA's dietary guidelines, from the pyramid to MyPlate, have been criticized for promoting certain foods and food groups as inherently healthy, often without adequately conveying the nuances of consumption, preparation, and individual dietary needs. For example, the promotion of dairy, as an essential part of a healthy diet, ignores the growing body of evidence suggesting that high dairy consumption may be linked to increased risks of certain cancers, digestive issues, and acne. The guidelines' handling of sugar is perhaps even more concerning. While the USDA acknowledges the need to limit added sugars, it fails to adequately address the pervasiveness of added sugars in processed foods, including many marketed as healthy options. The guidelines' reliance on food industry-funded research further complicates matters, raising concerns about bias and the downplaying of potential health risks. The USDA's messages about dairy and sugar illustrate a broader problem with the agency's approach to dietary advice, a tendency to oversimplify complex issues, and to prioritize industry interests over nuanced scientific evidence. This has created a situation where consumers are often misled about the true healthfulness of the foods they're encouraged to consume, contributing to a culture of chronic disease. The USDA's dietary guidelines, while influential, are not the only model for nutritional advice. Other countries have taken different approaches to guiding their citizens towards healthier eating habits, often with a greater emphasis on whole, unprocessed foods, and a more cautious approach to industry influence. Canada, for example, recently overhauled its food guide, moving away from specific food groups and instead focusing on broader dietary patterns. The new Canadian food guide emphasizes the importance of cooking at home, limiting processed foods, and being mindful of portion sizes. It also avoids specific recommendations for dairy consumption, instead encouraging individuals to choose water as their primary beverage. Brazil's dietary guidelines, too, prioritize whole foods and traditional dietary patterns, advocating for a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, legumes, and minimally processed grains. The Brazilian guidelines also emphasize the social and cultural aspects of food, encouraging families to eat together and to preserve traditional cooking methods. These examples highlight the diverse approaches to dietary guidance taken by countries around the world. They demonstrate that it is possible to create guidelines that prioritize public health without being beholden to the interests of powerful food industries. The story of the USDA's dietary guidelines is a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most official-sounding advice can be flawed, influenced by factors that extend far beyond the realm of science. But this story is not just about institutional failings. It's also about personal empowerment, about reclaiming our health by becoming informed eaters. We have the power to look beyond the headlines, to question the messages we're bombarded with, and to make food choices based on evidence, not industry agendas. This means educating ourselves about nutrition, understanding the influence of food marketing, and developing a critical eye towards health claims. It means embracing whole, unprocessed foods as the foundation of our diets, prioritizing vegetables, fruits, legumes, and whole grains. It means cooking at home more often, being mindful of portion sizes, and savoring the experience of eating. Taking control of our plates is not just about individual health. It's about creating a food system that prioritizes well-being over profit, one that nourishes our bodies and our communities. It's about reclaiming the joy of eating, the pleasure of preparing real food, and the power of making informed choices for ourselves and our families. If you would like more information to help with those choices, check out this video on the most inflammatory foods out there.